So this is what I have available. So if they are, kailan ko konti pa sila? They are just 14.
Hintay po tayong konti, ma'am. Wala
Sige.
pang 3.
Yeah, sige. 259. Sige. 50 students.
Call your classmates so Doctora could start.
Are we going to wait for 5 minutes, Doktora?
Kayo, ma'am. Up to you po.
Sige. Ano na it's 3:01. Sige, bigyan pa natin sila ng 4 minutes. Kasi 99 lang sila eh. Marami yata ito eh. I think it's more than 100.
Would you call your classmates to join in?
Doctor?
Yes.
Some students are waiting in the lobby, including the LO.
They are?
In the lobby.
Oh, have I been made the host?
Ma'am, admit niyo po.
Okay. Thank you.
82. Paano ba a-admitin 'tong mga 'to?
Wait lang, ma'am.
Oo, ikaw pa yata ang host, doktora.
Hindi, ma'am, ni-reclaim ko muna. Admit ko muna.
Sige. $82. Okay, I think they have all been admitted right now. So we have something like 214 students in the classroom now. So I think we can start. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. The lecture for this afternoon is non-communicable and chronic diseases. And I would like to thank our coordinator, Dr. Andres, who was kind enough to give me this topic, and also to Dr. San Luis for sharing these slides for me to deliver to you in this afternoon's lecture. Okay, so what we need to accomplish after this lecture is that we have to be able to define what non-communicable diseases are, and we should also be able to determine the risk factors for developing non-communicable diseases. And we also have to take a look at how we can assess the burden of disease of NCDs based on available data. And we also have to look at how we can develop strategies to address NCDs in the local setting. So these are the tasks we have to accomplish by the end of the lecture. So what are non-communicable diseases? Now, this has been defined as health problems not caused by infectious agents. So they are not passed from person to person. So they're not communicable. They cannot be transferred. And generally, okay, for it to develop, it takes a long time, and there is also slow progression. And previously, non-com diseases had also been known as chronic diseases. So, can we differentiate one from the other? So let's take a look at what chronic diseases are. Now, chronic diseases are defined as any disease that can be effectively managed over years or decades, but not cured. Okay, so these are long-standing diseases, and a classic example of this chronic disease is your HIV. So it's also defined as one that is not directly transmissible person to person. Okay, so we are not talking about HIV only here. And then routinely span years and often decades for it to be manifest. It is degenerative in some way, relating to aberrant or declining function in some body parts or system. So it has something to do with age. And these diseases are also often propagated by fundamental physiologic imbalances or disturbances such as inflammation. So let's take a look at the epidemiologic transition, or what we call your epidemiologic shift. Now, before, that was how many decades ago, we used to see infectious diseases leading the cause of mortality. But right now, okay, you see that there is an inversion now, okay, where we had at the start, we had very high mortality rates, but you see that the trend of your infectious diseases are now declining. And in here, on the other hand, we have a rising development of your NCDs. Okay, so this is what we call your epidemiologic transition. So there is a reversion of the uh, mortality rates relative to infectious diseases compared to your lifestyle or your non-communicable diseases. So let's take a look at what's happening to the world. So in terms of total non-communicable disease deaths, this statistics was given by the WHO, World Health Organization region, and these are comparable estimates 2012. Okay, and it has been estimated that 60% of deaths worldwide is actually due to NCDs coming from the Western Pacific region. And if you're going to take a look, okay, relative to deaths in millions, we have the highest occurring here at the Western Pacific region. And second here, we have very high mortality rates also at the Southeast Asian region. And coming in third is Europe. Okay, and least, of course, is your Eastern Mediterranean regions. So in 2012, it has been estimated that there were about 38 million deaths, okay, caused by your non-communicable diseases. Now, locally, this is what we have. This is the statistics of the Philippines. Okay, and at that time when it was taken, the total population was at 96,707,000. But right now, okay, we are already over a million. We are already more than 100 million. Okay, now it is stated here that the percentage of population living in the urban areas is about 48.8%, almost 50%. Okay, and the population proportion between ages 30 and 70 years is about 35.2%. Now let's take a look at the pie, at our pie here, and let's see how many deaths, okay, are caused by your NCDs. And it states here that NCDs are estimated to account for about 67% of total deaths. Okay, so broken down into the following, and we can see a big chunk of our pie here, which accounts for about 33%, okay, being explained or caused by your cardiovascular diseases. And we have the next second, okay, taking a big chunk of your pie is also other NCDs, which takes up about 13%. Your malignancies at 10%, okay. Diabetes, okay, this is a single disease causing about 6%, and other, you have your chronic respiratory diseases claiming 5%. Now, we have here injuries. This could be accidents claiming 8%. So you can see here this big chunk, okay, of NCDs is actually caused by your cardiovascular diseases, meaning that the highest, okay, cause of your mortality rates in the Philippines are your CVDs. Okay. So relative to sex, okay, cardiovascular diseases. Okay, we have here this continuous line here explaining male predilection, and this dotted and these interrupted lines here accounting for your females. Okay, so you can see here, okay, that in terms of cardiovascular diseases, your males are topping the list. Okay, and we have a lower, okay, mortality rates, but still the number one is your cardiovascular diseases. But there's a difference between the mortality rates between males and your females. Okay, and your malignancies, okay, still higher in the males. Okay, and if we will take a look at diabetes, okay, males and females start off, okay, almost the same, but then as the years progress from 2006 up to 2012, we see a rise in the mortality rates of your male diabetics relative to your females. Okay, so that is your statistics relative to mortality rates occurring in the Philippines. So let's take a look at the four main non-communicable diseases. And we have here, as you have seen in the pie chart as well as the bar graph, and it has been shown that the number one killer is actually your CVDs, cardiovascular diseases lumped together, specifically hypertension, stroke, and heart attacks. And coming in second are your malignancies. And third are your chronic respiratory diseases, to include your COPDs and asthma. And running in fourth is your diabetes and other related metabolic derangements. Now, other non-communicable diseases included are injuries, poisoning, nutrient and micronutrient deficiencies, genetic disorders, disabling disorders encompassing your osteoarthritis, chronic pain syndrome, and lastly, we have your substance abuse, not to be, not to be, it still has to be considered because it is important, especially during these times. Now let's take a look at the probability of dying from the four main NCDs between the ages of 30 and 70 years old. I think some of you are already within these age ranges. Now these estimates were also taken in 2012 WHO statistics. Okay, so we see here, where is India here? The Philippines is here. I think this is India. So we can see, okay, that relative to the probability of dying, where the age group more than 25, you can see these colored red areas of the map here. Okay, and as I have said, included are the Philippines. Okay, and I think this is India, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and we have those ages 15 to 19. Okay, occupied by the Americas, specifically the South Americas. Okay, and those ages 20 to 24, we have the African countries here. Okay, most of them coming from Africa. Okay, so that's your statistics for the probability of dying from the four main NCDs. And what are the four main NCDs? The four main NCDs, we said that they are your CVDs. What else? Malignancies. What's the third? The third is your diabetes, or is it or your respiratory, chronic respiratory diseases? Okay, interchangeably, number 3 and 4. And now let's take a look at the premature mortality due to NCDs in the Philippines. Now, this is now your statistics probability of dying between ages 30 and 70 years from the four main NCDs Philippine statistics. Okay, this is from the year 2000 up to 2012, comparing probability of mortalities in males relative to your females. So generally, you can see here that the probability occurring in males aged under 70 years old is higher as compared to your females. Now, what do we think? Let's take a look at the risk factors. Okay, let's take a look at the risk factors here. And excuse me, are we in, is that an Indian or is that Chinese or? Okay, anyway, let us take a look at the risk factors. These are your adult risk factors, comparing males relative to your females. And we can see, okay, we can see generally that the risk factors in males are actually higher, okay, except for obesity, okay, where in obesity it occurs in females, okay, almost twice, okay, the risk factors that that our males have. Now, relative to smoking habits, it's 44% for your males and about 10% only for females. Okay. Now, alcohol consumption, very high for males relative to your females. Okay. Hypertension, not much difference, 25 for males and 20.4 for your females. But take a look at obesity. In females, we have 8% and only about 4.6% in males. Okay, adding those together and getting the average, we have the totals here. Okay, so that is taking a look at the risk factors relative to premature mortality. Now, why do you think is there now a prominence of your non-communicable diseases? Anybody can explain? Anybody can give reasons why it is so right now? Why is it, do you think? Anyway, these are the reasons that have been given why right now we have a predominance of the occurrence of non-communicable diseases. Firstly, we have an aging population. Okay, aging population, why? And we can explain this to the, we have through the years, we have a lot of improvements relative to healthcare, okay, whether medically, surgically, and we now have a lot of improvements relative to technology in managing uh, diseases, okay, and that, okay, now allows for an increase in the ages of population of our population surviving, okay, unlike before wherein patients would die early because we could not even manage our patients dying of infectious diseases. So that's one of the reasons. And if you will notice, there is also a decline in birth rate. Okay, ask your friends right now. When before the average family would be something like about 6 or 8, where there's an average of about 6 children, or maybe 4. But right now, you can see that young couples would would content themselves with having 1 or 2 children only. Okay, so then we also have the impact of automobiles that you can see very well right now. If you will compare the traffic, okay, in your country or even in my country alone, okay, there is, you can see this is quite obvious, and this is pretty obvious, and this has an impact on how we live. How so? Okay, now with the presence of automobiles, what do workers do now? Because everybody has cars. No more walking, no more cycling. Okay, so instead of doing a lot of exercise, walking, maybe cycling, you just ride your automobile and you drive. Okay, also there is with that, there is also the stress of sitting it out in your cars, waiting for a long time for your traffic to abate. And in the meantime that you're waiting there, you're so stressed already because you cannot reach or you cannot arrive in your offices or your clinics on time. Furthermore, okay, not only automobiles has changed dramatically our lifestyles, but generally our lifestyle, okay, whereby before we used to do a lot of exercises because we walk, okay. Now, as I have said, we have cars. Okay, how about our diet? Let's take a look at the diet of Juan of today and the Juan of before. Okay, so what do we have early in the morning? Where do we go? We go to Starbucks, we go to Coffee Bean, and what do we get there? We get a coffee, a mug of coffee, and that mug of coffee is actually filled with sugar. Okay, very, very delicious, but okay, unknowingly, or you might also know it, but because you're addicted to the sugar, okay, and how many cups, okay, can you consume in a day? Furthermore, aside from that, okay, we have also progress to fast food. Okay, and if you will take a look at the food that we buy in McDonald's, in Jollibee, in BK, and whatever else, what do you notice? Food there are almost always fried. Okay, and if they are fried, how do you think are they preserved? Okay, before those those food items are brought to the freezers of your restaurants. Do you think they're fresh? Okay. And then we also have tobacco addiction, okay, which is the single largest cause of preventable morbidity and mortality. And we're talking here about malignancies. Of course, we have your lung cancer. We also have not only lung cancer, we also have our COPD. Okay. Now, the first world countries are actually ridding themselves of this tobacco, but business has to go on. The economy, because these first world countries cannot do away with the economy of your tobacco. So what they have done was to dump the tobacco, the business of tobacco, to the developing countries. Okay, where they have already rid themselves of tobacco, they have already dumped these products in our countries. And it's now our population who will, in about 10 or 20, 15 or 20 years, we will be the ones, okay, suffering from these diseases. Because, okay, because they have actually, these first world countries have kind of programmed, okay, our young. Remember, if you notice our advertisements about 5 years ago, who smokes? You can see in advertisements that the people who smoke, as advertised, are the the young ones, the strong ones, the beautiful ones, the handsome ones, and those actually living the life. If you will notice, that's the kind of advertisement that first world countries has developed, okay, for the developing countries, so that these these products of theirs will sell, okay, and they do not lose the economics of the business of tobacco being rid in their countries, but instead dumped to our countries. Now, physical activity, because of the technology that we have moved on from recent years, okay, our physical activity is now curtailed. Okay, we don't exercise that much. But now I think there is a very big improvement now because people have become aware that exercise is really important. Okay, but unlike before, when it has physical activity is actually a part of our daily living, when people walk, okay, early in the morning they walk to their offices, they walk to their clinics. There was a time when we were just so dependent on our vehicles. But right now, okay, what's happening now is our offices, our tall buildings have allocated gyms, maybe on the top floors or on the middle floors, where, okay, the employees can actually go down, spending an hour or two, okay, doing their exercises. Okay, so that's being done right now because we have already seen the impact of non-physical activity relative to our health. How about social and behavioral factors? I don't know if you saw this, if you're seeing this in your country, but in our country, there has been a drastic change, okay, between the very conservative culture of the Philippines as compared to now. Why? One of the reasons why is, these call centers. Well, we didn't have these call centers before, but you know, um, this they because it's so expensive to pay labor in the developed world. So what they did was, okay, to bring those call centers here anyway. Uh, People are just answering calls anyway. They don't really have to be present. So they established call centers here, okay, and us, the people here, answering, addressing the problems of people in first world countries. That's why if you'll notice, there there has actually been, this shift from people working in the evenings rather than in the mornings. Call centers, you can see that the shifts in work, you can see that people work in night shifts, and that also changed, okay, the social and behavioral patterns. um, in There was a study that was there was a study that was made in call centers, okay, and these call center buildings actually have this 7-Eleven. They have these stores in the ground floor. They have this 7-Eleven, Family Mart, and these kinds of stores. And they noticed, okay, that there was a very fast, okay, selling rate for which items do you think? Cigarettes, yes, very fast. What do you think? Can anybody guess?
Soft drinks,
Soft drinks? Yeah, also. What else? What else? Condoms. Okay, condoms. So our society, which was a very conservative one before, became permissive. Okay, permissive. Okay, so that was really a drastic change. So if a society now becomes permissive relative to social and behavioral factors like this, we are looking at a rise in the incidence of what? What do you think? Sexually transmitted diseases. Okay, so that was a study that was done, and it is evidence based, and that could be explained by this social and behavioral factor. There was a change. Okay, there was a drastic change because of the nature of the job. And if you will notice, there is also this culture. Actually, there's a different culture among call centers, among call center employees. Okay, and there has a study has been made, and they have a distinct culture in these call centers, which before was not really present because we didn't have those kinds of employees in our country. Okay, so now let's take a look at factors that contribute to chronic diseases. So we can actually divide it into two, as it says here, controllable. I mean, controllable. We can actually, we have control, we can actually modify, we can change, we may or we may not do. Okay, so that is having control. And out of the 10, okay, these are the things that have been mentioned. So you have tobacco. Can you control this? Yes. You actually have the choice to pick up that cigarette, to smoke it or not. Okay, or even if, say for instance, you're already a smoker, you still have the choice, okay, to what, to get rid of that habit. Now, diet, can we control this? Definitely. Okay, instead of having Starbucks, very sweet coffee, what can you have? Maybe you can drink tea. Okay, so it's still a choice. Activity patterns, what do you do? What do you do in the afternoon, in the evenings? Do you sit down, okay, on TV and become a potato couch, okay, whereby you sit in front of your TV watching TV for about 4, 5, 6 hours with your popcorn at hand, or maybe a burger and a soft drink, okay? And then, of course, in together with the social behaviors that have changed, okay, alcohol consumption. We can also control that, okay? Now, microbial agents, can we? Can we do this? Like, for instance, uh, allowing yourself to 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 have these risky behaviors of being permissive in terms of having sex, because sex has now become casual. How about toxic agents? When we talk about toxic agents, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about what other maybe we can include here our drugs, our illegal drugs, firearms, okay, sexual behavior, motor vehicles, okay, all of this we can control, okay. So it is our choice actually whether we want to participate or we we choose to negate all of these tempting uh, risky items, but really very palatable. Okay, so let's now take a look at the four key metabolic physiologic risk factors. So what are they? They're actually four. So that's your raised blood pressure or your hypertension, your overweight, which is your obesity, hyperglycemia due to our diet, as well as your hyperlipidemia is actually food choices. Okay, so we have a choice. Instead of saying, say for instance, eating that steak, okay, remember that steak is beef, right? Can't you not say for instance, choose your chicken breast instead, which is less fat, okay? And having, how about eating instead of a piece of very delicious pastry, why not go into your salad perhaps? So it's really a choice. Okay, so now let's take a look at your attributable deaths due to the leading NCD risk factors. So the risk factor is, so we have here on the left the risk factor and your non-communicable disease death globally, okay, in terms of percent. So relative to elevated blood pressure, we have 16.5%. Okay, tobacco use, 9%. Okay, your hyperglycemia plus inactivity, okay, both at 6%. And your being overweight as well as your obesity placed at 5%. Okay, so number one is your high blood pressure. And we know for a fact that high blood pressure this can be controlled. First and foremost, what um, can we control our diet? Yes, we can. What type of foods do we eat? Okay, so we should start looking at your low salt, okay, low fat diets and entertain our fruits and vegetables instead. So what is the importance of your NCDs? Is it really important? Okay, yes, it is important. Okay, and we can see this as reflected in the mortality or your death rates. Okay, so 40% of all deaths in developing countries, that includes your country as well as mine. Okay, so it's 40%. That's a lot. Okay, so it means that it's only a matter of 10%, and that's actually half, almost half of all deaths in developing countries. Now, 75% in industrial countries, okay, with CVDs as number one and your malignancies as number three. Okay, now CVDs, your cardiovascular diseases, cancer, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and hereditary disorders are responsible for about 25 million deaths worldwide. Okay, two-thirds of this, okay, 25 million, you multiply that by about 66.6%, and that the total number of deaths is actually coming from developing countries like ours. Okay, so it is really important. Okay, furthermore, in the epidemiologic transition, if you still remember, okay, in the transition that I showed you, the burden of disease now has shifted from communicable to your NCDs. Now, other implications of this, now it is rapidly, okay, it's actually on the onslaught in Asia. with CVDs as the number 2 leading cause of mortality. Almost 1,000 die of malignancies every day. Hypertension up to 15% in India, Indonesia, Thailand, and rising sharply in Africa, together with diabetes. Your RHD, okay, which is the major cause of premature deaths. And in the Eastern Mediterranean region, we have obesity, diabetes, as well as your circulatory disorders. So it's really important, okay? Now, other considerations. Now, many of these diseases are actually disabling. Okay, there are degenerative conditions of bones and joints, okay, which is actually the single most important cause of disability. Okay, it is costly to treat. Costly because these are chronic diseases. You know, they stay with you for a long, long time. Say, for instance, if you have hypertension, once diagnosed with hypertension, can you do away with management? Can you do away with treatment? Now, it's funny because I had a patient who consulted, okay, and he wanted the hypertension to be brought down immediately. And I asked this patient, when were you diagnosed? And he said that it's been a year ago. And have you been taking your medications? And he said that he felt she was feeling well, so she stopped the medication, and then whenever she has headache, she would take one. And then she said that she was taking the medications PRN. Okay, that's not how you treat hypertension. Okay, once you're diagnosed with that, that's continuous treatment till you die. Okay, so it means that it is costly to treat. So with diabetes, okay, you have to monitor your blood sugar. Okay, and right now it states here that 143 million, okay, claims an average 8% of total health budgets in industrialized countries. Okay, why? How so? Okay, remember that your diabetes type 1 and type 2. Type 2, you acquire it, and you acquire it because of your health practices. What do you eat? How much do you eat? Okay, now estimates also states that 50% of your cardiovascular diseases and a third of your cancers are actually preventable. Okay, now looking at the potential years of life lost, or your PYLL, okay, measures your premature deaths. So still part of your significance or the importance of your NCDs. Now let's take a look at the nature of NCDs. What is it really? How does it come about? So based on the natural history of your NCDs, let's take a look at the agent. Okay, we will discuss this one by one. Let's take a look at the time frame. Let's take a look at the nature of the disease. And let's take a look at synergism. Are there any diseases that will contribute more, say, for us to make it worse? Okay, or making the development of these chronic diseases more rapid. So let's take a look at those. Let's take a look at this nature one by one. Let's examine them one by one. So let's take a look at the first one, which is the characteristics of the agent. So there is an absence of a single necessary agent, unlike your infectious diseases. Okay, we identify, we do a culture and sensitivity test, we identify the specific microbe, and we do sensitivity tests, and we have the specific antimicrobial which will kill the agent. Okay, but in here, no. Okay, causes of your NCDs, we cannot pinpoint a single necessary agent. Now, in terms of disease classification system, it's disease-based, okay? It's also organ-based, and it's also manifestation-based. Okay, now, one exposure may cause many diseases. Say, for instance, if you smoke, will that only explain your having, say, for instance, lung cancer? How about the concomitant development or contributory factor to your cardiovascular disease? Is there such a thing? Okay. Smoking may cause or lead to or even aggravate different conditions. Yeah. So when you smoke, it's not only your lungs you were talking about, we're also talking about many, many risks, including your cardiovascular diseases. Many agents lead to the same condition, such as fire, sun, chemicals, which may actually cause burns. Okay, you agree? Now, let's take a look at the risk factors. Now, any factor, these are actually any factor which increases the risk of disease. It could be behavior. It could be behavior, as I've given you an example a while ago. Okay, could be physiologic, could be genetic. Okay, it could be environmental. It could also be social. Now, what are the synonyms? Synonyms of this, kindly take note, at-risk behavior. Now, when we talk about at-risk behavior, these are actually activities done by healthy persons which put them at risk to develop a particular disease. So maybe you can think of one or two or even more. How about predisposing factors? Now, when we talk about predisposing factors, we are actually pointing at existing circumstances or factors which influence the behavior by providing motivation for healthy behavior to happen. Say, for instance, if your parents smoke, will you be tempted to smoke? Yes. Okay. Many times over, you will be tempted to smoke because you see your parents doing this activity. Okay, so with parents smoking, then the tendency there is also for you to smoke. If, say, for instance, you see relatives uh, taking drugs, there's also a tendency that you will also fall into the trap of taking drugs. Now let's take a look at time frame. Time frame. If you have an infectious disease, okay, you're talking here about 1 week incubation period, 2 weeks, at most 3 weeks incubation period, and then you have the manifestation. You have a clinical, full-blown infectious disease. While in here in NCDs, we have long latent period. It takes months or even years before illness is apparent. Tell him I'm in a lecture right now. So, and usually, okay, there's actually multiple low dose exposure required to cause illness. Okay, there is no multiplication of the causative agent. Okay, now a single exposure with extended physiologic response can also be a combination of agents. We we can also, be talking about initiators or promoters in the development of cancer. Now, subsequent to other conditions, uh, example is your obesity, but we have an exception here, which is your acute poisoning. So now this time frames that we're talking about will factor in planning studies as well as control measures, okay, in making strategies to help in addressing these problems. So let's now also take a look at the nature of the disease. As we have said, who is that, Daddy? Okay, yeah. So the nature, when we talk about the nature of the disease, it's often chronic in nature, and this chronicity can lead to permanent impairment. It can leave residual disability, and it requires special training for rehab or long periods of supervision and care. Say, for instance, you had a stroke. Okay, so you with stroke, you can make that as an example, and all of this will actually fall in. Now, the function of long latency equates to the slow disease process, which allows the body to make adaptive mechanisms. In addition, okay, the residual of disease also requires ongoing medical treatment as well as rehabilitation. Now, some agents can produce both acute and chronic conditions, such as your poisoning. Excuse me. Now, synergism in disease causation is actually the fourth nature of the disease, and we're talking here about the effects of two or more agents which carry much higher risk than each of the two agents taken alone. Say, for instance, um, what is the risk of an individual with diabetes? Okay, diabetes developing uh, cardiovascular disease or kidney disease, and then an individual who is also uh, who smokes or who have hypertension at the same time. Okay, and there is a classic example here being given as your lung cancer. Okay, plus smoking plus exposure to asbestos. Now, non-smoking workers who are exposed to asbestos, this is a single risk, and smokers exposed to asbestos. Okay, so there's the difference here. This is now the difference. Okay, so non-smoking workers exposed to asbestos. So in here, there's no risk of smoking, while in here, we have the added risk of smoking plus your asbestos. Okay, so it shortens now the latency. So who do you think will develop lung cancer faster? The non-smoker, but he's exposed to asbestos? Or is it the smoker who is at the same time exposed to asbestos? So I think you know the answer for that. Okay, so let's now take a look at the difference between an infectious disease and a non-infectious disease. Okay, so remember your epidemiologic shift. Why is it that we have gone into this transition? Okay, so let's now compare your infectious disease relative to your non-infectious disease. And as I have said, okay, in an infectious disease whereby we can identify by doing a culture and sensitivity test a single agent, we cannot do that when we are addressing an NCD. Okay, an agent in infectious disease is specific, while in your NCD, not so. Okay, causes may be known when we're talking about your ID, while not so when we talk about your non-infectious disease. Incubation period, as I've said, in a week, 2 weeks, you have it. In here, takes years before you can see. It becomes manifest. Okay, single exposure is usually sufficient for somebody to develop the disease. In here, it may require, okay, because with smoking, doesn't mean that you smoke a pack and you uh, develop cancer, you develop COPD. In here, no, doesn't happen. Just like in your infectious disease, if you get exposed to what, say for instance, COVID, okay, SARS-CoV-2, okay, if your immune system is not really that good, then you get the disease. Then we can identify the causative agent. In here, no, it's not so. The condition is not so. Now, infectious disease usually produce an acute disease. In here, more often than not, it's chronic in nature. Okay, acquired immunity is possible. Well, in here, acquired immunity is not likely. Okay, diagnosing infectious diseases is based on tests specific to the disease agent, while in your non-infectious disease, diagnosis is often dependent on non-specific symptoms or tests. See the difficulty? Okay, it's really difficult to address your non-infectious diseases. Now let's take a look at the global status report on NCDs year 2014. Okay, so it has been reported that in 2012, 38 million NCD deaths have been reported globally. And in the same year, okay, 68% of 56 million deaths worldwide. Now, about 16 million, which equates to more than 40% deaths, were aged less than 70 years. And then 3/4 of all NCD deaths, which is about 28 million, and 82% of premature deaths occur in low and middle income countries. like your country and my country. Okay, so now let's take a look at what are we doing? Are we knowing all of these things, knowing all these statistics and estimates, and knowing about the nature of these diseases? Are we doing anything? Okay, so let's take a look at the global NCD action plan, okay, which was formulated to run through 10 years from 2010 up to 2020. I'm sure that right now we have WHO have come up with a new plan for this, but let's take a look at this plan that was formulated for the last 10 years. Okay, and we see here, we will discuss this individually. So, relative to the Global Action Plan for the Prevention and Control of NCDs, 2013 to 2020, we have our first target, which is actually here. Okay, but in order for us to understand it better, global target 1 is 25% relative reduction in overall mortality from CVD, cancer, or chronic respiratory diseases. And our target 2, at least 10% relative reduction in the harmful use of alcohol as appropriate within the national context. Our target 3, 10% relative reduction in the prevalence of insufficient physical activity. For target 4, 30% relative reduction in the mean population intake of salt and sodium, salt or sodium. And our target 5 is a 30% relative reduction in prevalence of current tobacco use in persons aged 15 years and above. Okay, so that's for the first 5. So we just took these first 5, okay, place them in here so that you understand them better, and separating the 5 from the 10 objectives or plans that have been formulated. And the next, we have target 6, 25% relative reduction in the prevalence of raised BP, or contain the prevalence of raised BP according to national circumstances. Our target 7, halt the rise in diabetes and obesity, very difficult. Target 8, at least 50% of eligible people receive drug therapy and counseling relative to glycemic control to prevent heart attacks and strokes. And our target 9, 80% availability of affordable basic technologies and essential medicines, including generics, required to treat major NCDs in both public and private facilities. Again, okay, so we have this up to 9. Okay, so let's now take a look at the percentage of countries with funding for NCD activities by function, 2013 by the WHO region and by World Bank. So let's see at how. Let's take a look. The prevention. Okay, primary prevention and health promotion. So you're familiar with this. Blue, healthcare and treatment, and your dark green is capacity building. Okay, and in here you have the procedures that we need to do. Early detection. So we have screening. Maybe an example of this will be pap smears, or in your country, I think you have your acetic acid wash for cervical cancer. And then we have the blue here, surveillance, monitoring, and evaluation. And third, we have your rehab services. So let's see. Let's take a look at Southeast Asian region. Capacity building, 100%. Okay. How about surveillance, monitoring? Okay, we have them placed at 100%. Okay. Now let's take a look at early detection. Early detection, we have about 90%. Okay. As compared to Europe, whereby, okay, primary prevention, health promotion, less than 100%. Okay. Healthcare and treatment, less than 100%. Okay. Surveillance and monitoring, high. Okay. This is maybe about 90 or close to 90%. Okay. And we have your rehab services placed at, it's very high, about 80%. Relative to Southeast Asia, we don't have the capability yet to do rehab services, placed at only 60%. Okay, so in here you can see the differences on how we are addressing our problems. Okay, so relative to, let's now compare your high income and your low income, or even just your high income, lower middle income. How are we addressing or funding? How much investment are we putting into our health services? So in high income countries, they are putting a lot in your healthcare and treatment. Okay, your dark blue. Also, they're putting a lot in capacity building as well as in screening. Okay, and compared to the lower middle income countries, whereby we are putting about, this is about 70 or maybe around 70% in screening. This is early detection of disease. Okay, surveillance, where are we? We're just in 60%. Rehab services, about 50% as compared to them who have more than 80%. So you see the differences on how we provide funding. Okay, how much are we investing in our healthcare system? So you can see here the very big difference on how developed countries or high income countries are addressing their healthcare systems in terms of putting in investments into these services. So what are the social economic impacts of non-communicable diseases? Now, poverty, first one, poverty is closely linked with NCDs. Okay, increase in NCDs impedes poverty reduction initiatives in low-income countries. How? How does it happen? By forcing up household costs on healthcare. Okay, how? Because of the lengthy and expensive treatment. How? Because most of the people who are afflicted are those who are actually the breadwinners of the family. Okay, so this is how NCDs impact on the economy of our families, our communities, our populations. Secondly, the vulnerable and socially disadvantaged people get sicker and die sooner than people of higher social positions. How so? Okay, now those who have more money, of course, can what they can afford. If you go to the supermarket and you can see all the healthy foods there, okay, organically grown, uh, no GMO, compared to the ordinary food items, which is more expensive, the healthy ones, right? So simply put, a classic example. You can actually explain the rest. Okay. Now, the vulnerable are at greater risk. Vulnerable and socially disadvantaged people, okay, are at greater risk of exposure to NCD risk factors, okay, like tobacco, and as I have said, unhealthy food. Okay, how much does a loaf of bread cost, and how much will a salad cost? Huh? One loaf of bread can cost, say, about 75 pesos to 100. One bowl of salad will cost you about 180 up to 200 pesos. You eat the salad one time. That loaf of bread can last you how long? 2 days? Okay. Now, Furthermore, we also have limited access to health services. Now, prevention and control of NCDs, how do we do this? So there must be a comprehensive approach involving all sectors. We cannot do this alone. So there has to be involvement of the health sector, the finance sector, foreign affairs, education, agriculture, as well as our planning people who do the planning for us. Okay, and our goal is to reduce the risks associated with NCDs and promote measures to prevent and control them. Okay, can we let me just can we breathe for a while? Take a breather for 5 minutes. Okay, before I continue. Yes, right. Hello. Hello. Oo. Oo. Ano? Oo, ano? Ano? Ano nga? Oo. Ano, ano? Oo. Oo. Tama. Reg, at saka sinabi na natin, ako nga mismo may-ari, ginawalan niya eh. Bakit a-action? Hindi na dapat kinukonsulta yan. Isa lang ang sagot dyan. Nobody is allowed. No, oh. Pinawalan mo. Oh. Nobody. Oo. Nobody. Actually, actually sinabi ko sa kanya kahapon yan na I think we have enough grounds sabi ko to terminate the contract. Tapos sabi niya, yun nga yung yung naka-contract sila pa ang may right dyan. Sabi ko, I think there is just cause already, Jojo, sabi ko, to terminate the contract. Actually, sinabi ko yun sa kanya. So, yun, oo. Sige. Ano yun, basta ang impress, oo, basta impressive sa kanya rin. Tama yun. Tayo nga, we were not allowed eh. Tayo ang may-ari dyan. So, there is not even a question anymore. Dapat hindi na tayo tinatanong. Oh, dapat hindi No, hindi tinatanong yan. Kasi may yan eh, may legal eh. So, dapat outright sinabi niya, hindi kayo pwede po. Yung may-ari na binawalan kung pumunta dyan, kayo pa. Dapat ganun ang sagot niya. Oo. Actually, sabi ko kasi. Oo. Tsaka imagine, yung kontrata ko, sabi ko sa iyo, yung kontrata ko, nakaano doon. Kasi hinihingi yun at any time. They will be allowed to visit, to inspect us at any time, anything. Nandun yung sa kontrata. Kasi he wanted that. It's there the contract. Kaya, pag ano eh, oo.
Naka-lecture kasi ako. Oo, at saka yung kanya, I'm a little disappointed kasi bakit tatanungin pa tayo? Ako nga, ginawalan niya ako na hindi pumasok dyan eh. So, sige, ganito na lang na ito. Okay, basta ano nila, basta hindi allowed. Hindi allowed. Oh, hindi allowed. Nobody is allowed. Nobody is allowed. Nobody is allowed. Nobody will get given their clothes. They buy. Bili sila ng mga gamit nila. Then unang-una, they brought that upon themselves. Okay, now they address their problem. Yun ang ano. Tawagan ko siya mamaya. Oo. Sige. Oo, kasi may mga utang pa yan eh. May utang pa sa Maynila. 10,000 ang utang nila sa Maynila. Naipon. Kaya, papabayaran ko na yun. Kasi yung Can you please do that? I'm in the middle of my lecture. Can you please help? Maybe you can do that. Ano, it's just... Okay. Marla, teka. Kasi kinat ko yung lecture ko isang kanina. I'm in the middle of my class. I'm doing my lecture. Okay, ganito. Diyos ko naman. Diyos ko talaga. Kulang naman yun.
Hello. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, so how do we go about preventing and controlling the non-communicable the non-communicable diseases of the world? So let us focus on lessening the risk factors because remember, we cannot really address such a thing as a causative agent because we don't have any single causative agent. So let us focus on lessening the risk factors associated with your NCDs. And furthermore, okay, there are low-cost solutions to reduce the common modifiable risk factors, like for instance, tobacco use, unhealthy diet, physical activity, as well as harmful use of alcohol. Okay, there is also such a thing as NCD and risk factor surveillance. Now, there are also what we call high impact essential NCD interventions through primary healthcare approach, which is early detection and timely treatment. So we have here come in now your screening programs, okay, which actually reduces the need for more expensive treatment. Say if we are able to screen, we are able to detect the early onset of these diseases, then we can actually, if we arrive there early, we can actually revert. Okay, thus reducing the need for more expensive treatment, which can come in at a later time. Further, we should also focus on healthy public policies to promote NCD prevention and control. Okay, in the Philippines, there are a lot of schools now which actually have banned the sale of soda in their canteens. Okay, and that's actually one way of preventing the children from developing the habit of drinking these very sweet drinks, which are actually bad for our health. We also take a look at reorienting health systems to address people with non-communicable diseases. Now, what are the pitfalls? Let's take a look at where we are failing. Okay, so these are some of the pitfalls. Okay, in lower income countries generally have lower capacity for the prevention and control of NCDs. Okay, while high income countries are nearly 4 times more likely to have NCD services covered by health insurance than low income countries. Very true, okay? And in countries with inadequate health insurance coverage are unlikely to provide universal access to essential NCD interventions. Okay, so economy is really very important in addressing um, the problems, okay, as well as the risk factors that come with the development of these diseases. So, excuse me. So these are some of the uh, responses, okay, that World Health has actually come up with. So we have the Global Action Plan, which was formulated to cover years 2013 up to 2020. Okay, and we have global strategies to reduce the harmful use of alcohol, and these are now specifics. We also have the global strategy on diet, physical activity, and health. Okay, and I'm sure that in your country, you also have your own strategies on how to address specific problems. Okay, so this is actually a very good activity that we are supposed to do, but yeah, I think we can still. Okay, I don't think we don't have time for this, but it would have been a very productive activity. But what I'm going to do is just, finish the lecture so that we can already we can we can close this lecture. So let's take a look at the specific problems like tobacco control. So this is now the WHO framework convention on tobacco control. So these are what they were able to come up with. So price and tax measures to reduce the demand for tobacco. Non-price measures to reduce demand for tobacco. Protection from exposure to tobacco smoke. Regulation of the contents of tobacco products. Regulation of tobacco product disclosures, packaging. Actually, we are. If you notice, if you buy a package of cigarette, it states there are warning signs there, and it states that the smoking can actually be, it is actually bad for your health and things like those. So we are kind of moving in terms of addressing a few of our problems now. But this is a risky behavior. Okay, you can see very well that there is a no smoking sign, but then the driver himself is the violator. Okay, with that cigarette smoke in his hand. So regards physical inactivity and diet. Okay, these are the things that we have come up with. At least 30 minutes of regular exercise. Okay, on most days, reduces the risk of CVD and diabetes, as well as colon cancer and breast cancer. Muscle strengthening and balance training can reduce falls and increase functional status. And more activities may be required for weight control. So that it is in as far as physical inactivity and diet are to be addressed. So relative to alcohol, okay, these are the things that have been come up with to address this specific problem. Okay, so those are more or less okay what we have been doing in order to address our NCDs. Now in 2013, the Department of Health launched its NCD program, and we have these four items here focused on. So cigarettes, smoking. So we're looking at smoke free. Sustancia is what do you call this? This is health, like promoting low salt, low fat diet. Sigla is energy and physical activity. This is exercise. And then slow sa tagay is actually, this is alcohol consumption. And tagay is a term that's locally used when um, groups go into drinking sprees. Okay, so it's a go slow in tagay. Okay, so what are our objectives? Our objectives are the following. First is to generate public interest and awareness of healthy lifestyle. Okay. Encourage the public to make personal commitments to healthy living. And the highest, of course, is to engage private and public institutions to commit to establishing environments that encourage healthy lifestyle choices. And our targets, of course, cuts across the board, okay, from the infant, okay, up to the time, the infant, the school child, the workforce productive age group, as well as the elderly. So we cut across the population ages. So the message are here relative to smoking. These are the messages for Trimedia campaign. We have Be Smart, Don't Start, Quit Smoking. These are the advocacies, okay, and the what we are trying to promote so that people becomes aware and progress and not to develop the habit of smoking. And then we also have sustancia, okay, cut back on low salt, low fat diet. Don't skip breakfast, okay, and eat more vegetables and fruits instead. And then we have this is physical exercise, go sigla. These are actually local advocacies, local trimedia campaigns that the Department of Health has embarked on, and then this is alcohol use. Okay, so touch points. Okay, Pilipinas Go for Health. Our touch points. Okay, we do we touch online, meaning you can access. You can actually access all of these through television, through your laptop, through your cell phones. Okay, we have champions. We have there are people who are actually models. Okay, who can show a kind of advertise or make these specific advocacies and let people know that they're actually practicing these things. And then we partner with the NGOs, with the communities, with non-government organizations as well as the government organizations, and we make events, say for instance marathon activities, um, exercise. We promote exercise activities in the workplace, things like those, and we do other things. Okay, and then this is just a summary of everything that we are doing right now. So Filipinas Go for Health, and we have our four main points. The Filipinas Go for Health. So sigla, go easy in alcohol, smoke free, and going for healthy food. And then we also have social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Okay, and those are the what do you call this, media vehicles that we can actually uh, touch base with. Okay, so with that, I think that's all for this lecture, and I hope you learn from it. Okay, so I have there's another lecture coming up at 4:30. I'm really sorry, but I really have to cut this lecture short. Okay, and I just hope that you learned from this lecture, because NCDs is really our problem nowadays. Okay, we are more or less have gone from the infectious diseases, but addressing NCDs is more complicated, And actually addressing NCDs actually starts from infancy. Okay, so it's not just when you like right now, because you know atherosclerosis actually atherosclerosis atheromatous plaques building up in our blood vessels does not come in only when you're a teenager, when you go into your productive age group, but it actually starts when you're still very very young. So we have to start healthy practices, eating habits, okay, exercise, and rid ourselves of all the unwanted things like smoking, alcohol, and other toxic agents. Okay, and we also have to learn to make adjustments to the life that we have now, so lessening our stresses. Okay, so with that, I would like to thank everyone, okay, for listening for this lecture, and I hope that you learned from this. Okay, so I would like to say goodbye now, and I'm off to another lecture. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.